Okay, you know that feeling? The one where a creaking floorboard suddenly sounds like the prelude to disaster? Well, we're diving headfirst into the deliciously dark world of Final Destination today.
Yeah, and it feels like the perfect time.
Exactly. With Final Destination Bloodlines now here, it's the perfect moment to really dissect what makes this latest entry tick for longtime fans and maybe for people just bracing themselves.
Absolutely, and we've pulled together a pretty interesting mix of takes for you. We're looking at reviews from places like The Sun, but also genre spots like the Lost Highway Hotel and Molderville.
Okay.
Plus, The Guardian, The Daily Beef, Business Insider, Cinema Blend, Polygon, and we've got the Wikipedia overview, just to keep us grounded.
So quite a range there.
Yeah.
Right, so our mission here is basically to cut through all that, extract the really fascinating bits, the key insights. We want to give you a solid handle on Final Destination, Bloodlines, the premise, what people are saying, those moments that will make you gasp.
Just the core stuff, no getting bogged down.
Exactly. All right, let's unpack this, starting with the central hook. What's the setup this time? How does it mesh with the classic Final Destination formula?
Well, the fundamental concept, that brilliant, terrifying idea, it's still there.
Okay.
Someone has a horrifying vision of a disaster. They manage to pull themselves and a few others out just in time.
Like a classic escape.
Exactly. Only to find out that death, feeling a bit, let's say, cheated, has a very, very specific to-do list for each survivor.
Never lets it go.
Never. But what's interesting with Bloodlines is how they anchor it. The film apparently throws us right into this really visceral premonition, but this time it takes us back, way back, to the 1960s, at the Skyview Restaurant Tower.
Wow. Okay. That opening sequence, I've heard the buzz around it's pretty intense.
Right.
What are reviewers actually highlighting? What makes it hit so hard?
Well, several reviews mention the setting itself, claustrophobic, the fear of heights, confined spaces. It taps into those primal fears.
Yeah, relatable stuff.
Right, and then there's the way the disaster unfolds. It's described as utterly improbable, but somehow mechanically logical.
The Rube Goldberg element.
Exactly. It's a perfect snapshot of what the franchise does best, making the mundane absolutely terrifying. But Bloodlines doesn't just stop with a cool opening disaster.
Right.
We get introduced to our protagonist, Stefani Reyes. Kitten Sanawana plays her. And we find out pretty quickly this isn't just, random bad luck. It's not just being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting then. The generational curse idea. How does that shake things up?
This is a big one. It's something critics are definitely latching on to. The film reveals this direct hereditary link. It all traces back to that first disaster in the 60s.
So it runs in the family.
Pretty much this generational curse becomes the main engine driving the story. It's not just about dodging the next weird accident anymore. It's about digging into this family history that's tangled up completely with death's plan. And that, seriously ramps up the stakes. Stefani's not just fighting for herself.
She's fighting for her whole family line, potentially.
Exactly. Her past, her future, all of it.
So it's layering something more on top of the classic formula, not just the sequence of bizarre deaths. There's more story this time.
Precisely. And that interplay is something a lot of the sources we looked at are talking about. The Guardian, for instance, they called it a mix of campy, grisly deaths and absurd Rube Goldberg-style fatal scenarios.
Stuff we expect, yeah.
Right. But also alongside a fresh sense of storytelling finesse and visual flair.
That sounds like a tricky balance, though. Trying to keep the thrills, but also tell a more substantial story.
It is. It really is. And multiple sources seem to think they pull it off, mostly. This balance keeps it engaging, stops it from just becoming relentless gore.
A gore fest, yeah.
Right. The moments of dark humor, which often come from just how bizarre the deaths are, they give you that needed breather, that release.
Okay, and this family curse angle, it sounds like it adds more than just plot twists. It brings in some real emotion. Is that the sense you get?
It seems so, yeah. This whole device lets the film explore themes that go beyond just, don't die.
Right.
Stefani's trying desperately to protect her loved ones from this thing that feels completely inescapable, that apparently creates some genuine emotional connection for the audience.
Makes sense.
Sources like Molderville, they pointed out that grounding the horror in her trying to save her family, it taps into something more universal than just trying to save your own skin.
That responsibility, yeah.
Right. It adds stakes that maybe some earlier films didn't quite reach in the same way. And it also lets them explore things like generational guilt.
Ah, interesting. The idea that the past haunts the present.
Exactly. And the consequences of cheating death aren't just for you, but for everyone who comes after. Adds a layer of complexity.
Okay, but let's talk about the main event for many fans. The signature Final Destination moments, the elaborate, inventive deaths. Does Bloodlines deliver?
Oh, absolutely. By all accounts, yes. The film definitely brings the intricate, domino effect death sequences that people expect. They haven't forgotten the core appeal.
Good to hear.
And there's one scene in particular that seems to be getting a lot of chatter. The one involving an MRI scan.
Oh yeah, I have heard whispers about that. Apparently it's particularly unpleasant.
That seems to be the consensus.
And Business Insider mentioned something about Richard Harmon, one of the actors, actually suggesting the idea, which seems counterintuitive.
Right. You'd think they'd want an easier time for their character. But yeah, the report suggests his idea, apparently fitting his character's pierced look, really amped up the intensity and the creativity of that scene. It's being cited as a prime example of how the film keeps finding new, really gruesome ways for fate to, collect its dues.
Always finding new phobias to tap into. Okay, now, for the series veterans listening, there's a familiar face back in Bloodlines. Tony Todd as William Bloodworth.
Yes.
What's the deal with his appearance this time? Is it significant?
Bloodworth's return is definitely a big moment, yeah. And according to Polygon, his appearance actually ends with a really poignant farewell.
Oh, really?
Apparently, Tony Todd improvised a monologue, just reflecting on life and death. It kind of makes you think, doesn't it? About the weight these characters carry, even in such an extreme fictional world.
Wow, so more than just a quick, hello, here are the rules type cameo.
Seems like it. Sources are describing it as this really heartfelt tribute, both to the character who's become so iconic in the series, and also to Tony Todd himself for his contribution over the years. Polygon called it a, quote, dignified and empowering send-off. So it adds some real emotional heft, especially for the longtime fans.
That's actually really nice to hear they've honored him in the character like that. But okay,
yeah,
it can't all be perfect. Not every aspect got glowing reviews, did it? I thought I saw something about the CGI.
That's a fair point. Yeah, that did come up. The Lost Highway Hotel, specifically, they noted that the film relies pretty heavily on CGI for some death scenes, and that sometimes it results in visuals that feel a bit, how did they put it, shiny and inauthentic.
Oh, okay. Lacking that visceral punch, maybe.
That seems to be the critique, the feeling that, really well done practical effects can feel more tangible, more genuinely horrific, whereas sometimes CGI, if it's not quite there, can feel a bit weightless, maybe pulls you out of the moment slightly.
So a potential trade-off there, maybe going for spectacle with digital effects, but possibly losing some of that squirm factor the older films sometimes had with practical stuff.
That seems to be the gist of it. But it's worth saying, when you look at the overall reception, the general feeling seems to be pretty positive. Final Destination, Bloodlines, is mostly being seen as a successful revitalization, a welcome return.
So despite that one criticism about the effects, the film generally hits the mark for people.
Yeah, I think so. The main achievement seems to be how they've fused that signature macabre creativity, the crazy death scenes, with a narrative that actually feels compelling, digging into family, fate, all that.
Right.
The film's ability to balance the horror fans expect with, well, a surprising amount of emotional depth. That seems to be what's making it stand out, making it worthwhile for, both the diehards and maybe people just dipping their toes in.
Okay, so it sounds like Final Destination, Bloodlines, manages to put a fresh spin on things while still delivering what makes these movies so, unforgettable.
Yeah, that blend of inventive, gasp-out-loud deaths and a story with a bit more heart, maybe.
A bit more resonance, yeah.
Exactly. It leaves you thinking not just about how fragile life is, which is kind of the baseline for these films,
right,
but also about maybe the weight of family history and what happens when you try to outsmart destiny.
It definitely gives you something to think about. Considering the film's focus on fate and family legacy, it makes you wonder, what aspects of your own life do you feel are shaped by forces maybe beyond your control? And how do you navigate that?
Yeah, and that blend of horror and the unexpected humor they mentioned in Bloodlines. What do you think the secret is to making really grim subjects engaging? How do you make them thought-provoking instead of just depressing?
Lots to chew on there. Well, if this deep dive has piqued your interest, we definitely encourage you to check out Final Destination Bloodlines. And maybe even go back and watch some of the older ones. See how those themes evolved.
Definitely. Thanks for joining us as we plunged into the delightful dread of Final Destination. We'll look forward to exploring another fascinating topic with you next time.